This is an overview of Chapter 14 on informative presentations. What is an informative speech or an informative presentation? The goal of an informative speech is to enhance an audience's knowledge and understanding of a topic. In preparing for an informative speech, it's important for you to be able to identify your goal and to identify the purpose for which you're going to be speaking. Some of the characteristics of a good informative speech are, first of all, an informative speech should be intellectually stimulating. You should either be presenting new ideas, new facts, new information that will pique the curiosity of your audience and want them to know more about your topic. The second thing that you want to keep in mind is that a good informative speech should be relevant. It should have listener relevance and link it to your audience. You want points that are going to clarify how a particular subject or topic may be relevant to your audience. The third thing you want to keep in mind is that a good informative speech should be creative and innovative. It needs to have good research, and it needs to use productive thinking to look at things in new or different perspectives. Fourthly, it should be memorable. You want your audience to be able to take away something from that speech that they're going to remember well after the speech is over. And finally, you want to make sure that you are aware of diverse learning styles, that not all people learn in the same way. Some of us are visual learners, we learn by seeing. Others of us are auditory learners, we learn by hearing. So you want to make sure that you are employing the senses of your audience, not just hearing, but also vision as well. And in the 13th chapter, we'll talk more about visual objects and visual presentations and presentational objects. All right, what are some of the basic purposes of an informative speech? The first purpose that you see here on the screen is a speech of definition. A speech of definition is one in which you define words, objects, or concepts. For example, if you're talking about something in the economic field, a speech of definition may be defining certain terms. Or, for example, if you wanted to do a speech on the stock market, you could define what the NASDAQ is, what the Dow Jones average is. Those are kinds of things that you can use in a speech of definition. The second is a speech of description. In a speech of description, you describe objects, persons, or issues. So, for example, a speech of description could be talking about who Teddy Roosevelt was, or you could be describing what an 8-cylinder engine looks like, or you could be talking about and describing what certain issues mean or how certain things work. The third type is a speech in which you distinguish between different things. This is very similar, I think, to a compare and contrast speech. You're distinguishing between two things. So in other words, you could distinguish the difference between a Samsung phone and an iPhone, or a Chromebook and an iPad. You could be distinguishing what is the differences between these two things. What's the difference between a Chromebook and a laptop? That was something that I was looking at here recently. Fourthly, the one I just mentioned is compare and contrast. This is especially useful if you're looking at two different items that you want to show what the strengths and weaknesses are of object A and object B. One of the things I did not notice here is a speech demonstration. And what a speech demonstration is, you're showing your audience how to do something. So for example, if you want to show your audience how to cook gumbo, that would be a speech of demonstration. If you're showing your audience how to change a flat tire on a car and you're going through the motions of that, you're showing us how to do that, that is a speech of demonstration. The chapter also mentions presenting information effectively. So you want to create information interest. And here are two things that are mentioned, and we'll bring this up a little bit more when I talk about attention getter in the organization and structure of your speech. You can ask rhetorical questions, or you can somehow arouse your audience's curiosity in your topic. It's important that you present information effectively by demonstrating information relevance. We pointed that out earlier in the earlier part of this presentation. How is this information relevant to your audiences? And so you want to make that connection to your audience. Why is this topic important? Showing its importance, showing its novelty, its newness for your audience, or showing it for its usefulness. One of the concepts that you should be aware of is revealing extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is a motivation that goes out beyond the presentation itself. It goes beyond just why should I listen to this speech to the importance of why I want to remember things about this speech. It's also that you make sure that you are designing informative content and not persuasive content. To know how to organize a good speech, we'll talk a little bit more about that in Chapter 12. How to avoid information overload. I think one of the hazards of beginner speakers is they think that they need to provide more and more information for your audience. Remember, your speech is only 3 to 5 minutes, so you don't want to bombard your audience with information. And also, which we'll talk about in Chapter 13, is organizing your content in an effective way, a way that's going to make it flow and going to make it memorable for your audience. Here are some important research, the research checklist that should also be in your text. Does your audience have some generalizations to remember from your details and significant specific facts? Have you used simple words and concrete ideas to begin your audience, to help your audience remember? Again, I mentioned that when we talked about language a little bit, in using words that are concrete and specific, to use terminology and terms that your audience is going to understand. So you need to be able to define terms or tell us what those terms mean. So as you look through this checklist, there's some very good points that you want to keep in mind as you prepare your speech. And again, here are some terms that you want to know: comparison, contrast, synonym, antonym, operational definition. What an operational definition is, you especially want to know that. At the end of this chapter, this presentation, I have presented some terms that you should know for further study. These terms are also found at the end of Chapter 14. All right.